Why does it sometimes hurt to play the piano? For many people who play, both at the amateur and professional level, pain and associated tension, injury, and other problems are a regular accompaniment to piano playing, and it's too bad. It's definitely too bad. Let's talk about where that kind of problem comes from and what you can do about it. So first of all, the causes of pain when you're doing anything have to be answered in order to get any kind of solution, because there are different causes of pain, and unless you know what the cause is, you can't work on a solution. So if I have a lot of pain when I am just walking normally down the sidewalk, I'm not wearing the wrong shoes, and I'm not obviously doing something really strange like crossing my legs and tangling them up, then I might not be causing it by how I'm moving. I might have some kind of injury, maybe arthritis or something like that. And it's not my fault. It's not anything I did, maybe. However, if my feet really hurt after a long walk, and it turns out there's a rock in my shoe, that's probably the cause, and that's something I neglected to take care of. I could have handled that. So we want to talk about especially the kind of things at the piano that you can prevent by your own choices. So first of all, the main thing we have to come to terms with at the piano is that all piano playing is physical motion. Okay, in a way it's almost like a sport, because you're just moving constantly. And that little clip at the beginning is just to illustrate, how much motion there really is. That's a crazy etude by Scriabin that I've been practicing. When something is going that fast, there's that much motion over that much of the piano. Yeah, absolutely, we have to think very carefully about how all those motions work. By the way, Scriabin himself got hurt when he was a student at the conservatory. He was trying to compete, I believe, with Joseph Levine to see who could play a piece by Liszt the fastest. And he injured his hand, and that's why he has a couple of left-hand alone compositions, because his right hand was on rest. So a lot of people are not immune from this that you'd think would know better. Okay, so I like to divide motion into two broad categories: healthy motion and the other kind. Okay, the bad kind. So healthy motion is anything that is natural to the way that your body wants to move. It's kind of how you're designed to move. We might use a word like ergonomic. We might use a word like efficient. Efficient. We might use a word like intuitive. It just feels like I was born to do this, and it feels right. Feels great. Okay, I kind of exult in it when I do it. It just feels like I was made to do this. The other kind, we could talk about tense, awkward, of course painful. Often it's going to be associated with inaccuracy, clumsiness, and other such terms, okay? And normally we're very, very aware at the piano when we experience this. My own journey involved a kind of lack of informed teaching for a long time, really well into my music school student career. Especially as a kid, I just had teachers who were really clueless. They couldn't explain any of this stuff. And so it was just kind of left to me to sort of crash around the piano and try to figure things out. Actually, because I was really crazy about music, and I'm still really crazy about music, I went at it with a lot of energy, very animated. And it happened that at this church where I grew up, my father was the minister, and they were given a Steinway piano. I believe it was donated for a wedding, and the family just let the church keep it, so it was a pretty expensive donation. So I was kind of the main person who played it. I would go in at night because I had my dad's keys, and I would play it. I was so out of control, the way I was crashing around this piano trying to play Rachmaninoff and stuff, that the fall board, this part right here is called the fall board. All along here, along the entire length of the fall board, the finish was chipped away so that the raw wood was showing below, and you could actually feel the gouges. It was, without even looking, you could feel how just from hitting it with the ends of my fingers and my fingernails, I had dug it out. At the time, I thought this was completely normal. I thought this is normal piano playing, and later I realized, what in the world? That's like somebody, you get a car and it's a month old and it has dents in it all the way around, and you think, well, that's just normal driving, right? You just hit a light pole, you hit a cow, you hit a goose, a fire hydrant. It's all in a day's driving, no big deal. And I was proud of those signs of damage because I thought that meant I was intense. Young people are just, we're all stupid when we're young. That's pretty much how it is. Okay, so anyway, my father passed away last year, and I went back to that city for the funeral, played for the funeral, and they had removed the fall board and sent it away to somebody, and it was perfectly refinished. And I thought, boy, that was entirely, I should pay them for that, because I probably did all that damage. So anyway, that's all to illustrate that it's possible to have no idea how violent, out of control, and just physically disastrous one's technique can be until somebody shows you. And nobody showed me. So I was doing all this kind of stuff. Tense, awkward, inaccurate, clumsy, destroying the fall board on an expensive Steinway. Okay, so the first thing we need to do in addressing these kind of technical problems is learn to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy motion. Both in ourselves, in our own playing, what am I doing right now? Is it healthy or unhealthy? And as teachers, observing a student, is that student moving in a healthy or unhealthy manner? So that's the first part. It's very, very important. The other side of this that is so difficult is the problem of scores for classical musicians. I'll talk about jazz musicians in just a moment. Scores don't show you how to play the piano. They give you no information on the physical task of playing the piece of music that's in front of you. They are a graphic representation of sound and time. Okay, all those little dots are the pitches and the lengths of them and maybe the articulation, some pedal marks, whatever, and then the rhythmic values and the measure numbers and bar lines and that kind of stuff. It's just sound and time. It doesn't say anything about where should my wrists be right now. What should my shoulders be doing? Is my arm going this way or that way or this way or that way? Okay, there's no information coming from the score. And that includes when you put fingerings in there. Okay, think about how little information fingerings give you, right? It says 2 or it says 3. Well, that means that the end of this one is touching that key at that moment. But how did it get there? Did it come through the air like this? Did it slide over like this? What was the physical motion that got to that C sharp at that moment? See, it's almost no information. Okay, so it's on us to learn to be very discerning about the motions that go into piano playing. With jazz musicians, I've had some experience giving technique lessons to jazz musicians, and here's what I think the situation is. Of course, the score for jazz has even less information, melody and chords. And so where do jazz players learn how to move? I think there is less of a tradition in jazz piano of talking about any kind of technique at all. Okay, you do have certain players like, for example, Oscar Peterson, who had beautiful fluent technique. And then you have certain players like Thelonious, who are very tense and very awkward physically at the keyboard. And the other aspect of jazz that's really interesting is because so much of it is improvised, it's not going to be repeated, nothing gets rehearsed, right? You're rehearsing your audiation and your rhythmic sense, your awareness, your ensemble, all of that is being rehearsed to a high degree. But the actual notes, how this thing's going to go, it's always the first time. So I believe what tends to happen with jazz pianists is the types of passages that they improvise, the types of accompaniments, and so on, either they tend to draw upon what is ergonomically natural for them and come up with something pretty comfortable and perhaps avoid technical things that are awkward, like playing thirds like Chopin. How often do you hear a jazz pianist play thirds? Not very often. George Shearing would practice Chopin etudes, but generally you don't have this kind of double note, double sixths, this kind of stuff, because it's not natural for most people. And so a lot of jazz pianists end up pretty comfortable because they get to choose the kind of pianism they do. However, occasionally you get jazz pianists who have quite a bit of struggles in that area. So jazz is particularly interesting just because all the information, almost all of it, is coming from somewhere not in the score. Okay, so let's talk about the two main bad motions. Okay. The two most common problems. Number one is isolation. Isolation is the idea that the fingers can move by themselves in isolation without any help from the hand, the arm, the shoulder, and really the rest of the whole body. Okay? And the way this looks at the piano, often you'll see this kind of really tense lifting and striking. Okay? And this comes from this whole stupid tradition of, you ever hear about putting a penny on the back of your hand and not letting it fall off? That. Okay? If you've ever taught that, stop. Because you don't know what you're doing. You're causing harm. So don't do it. Wait until you know what you're talking about before you teach. So isolation is not a natural way to move and creates a great deal of tension. The other one is deviation. Deviation. There. And deviation is the idea that my hand is here, but I pull a finger way off to the side to play something. Okay? So I'm spreading out and pulling off to the side to try to play things. And between these two, they account for probably the majority of real physical problems at the piano. In addition, there are other things, particularly posture issues. Very tense shoulders is a big one. Neck, head thrust too far forward, leaning too far over the keyboard, as well as sitting too high and too low. Glenn Gould was very famous for sitting really low. He had a chair that his father had made him, to which he was very attached. And the seat actually wore out, and so in a lot of the films of Gould, you'll see he's actually just sitting on an open frame. It's an open square, and there's nothing in the middle, so he's actually just kind of sitting on a piece of a board. And he's very low, and so his posture is like this. Now, Glenn Gould played with tremendous beauty and evenness, but what is not widely known is behind the scenes how much pain he was in and how obsessive he was about trying to cure his own physical struggles at the piano, both by changing the way he sat and crossing his legs and messing his shoulders around and actually taking a lot of medication he shouldn't have been taking. It was a very unhealthy situation. He was just so spectacularly talented that he could still play the Goldberg variations and lots of other stuff too. So there are things like posture and seating height that also have to be taken into consideration. What do you do about this? First of all, the best advice I can give is get with the qualified teacher who really understands this stuff. I know how difficult that can be. I've talked to students who live in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest teacher of any kind is 80 miles away across the desert. I understand that. But ideally, a good teacher is the best resource for that. Somebody who can listen to you, watch you, and make comments right there with you in the room. If that is unavailable, I do have some courses in this area, the Piano Foundations courses, 4 Pillars of Piano Technique, Tone Production, and How to Practice, that is meant to address this stuff. Especially the 4 Pillars course addresses the tension and pain issue. So you're welcome to check those out if those are helpful. Finally, the saying that I use all the time regarding this issue is, if it hurts, it's wrong. There is no circumstance under which piano playing should be painful. If anything is painful at the piano, you're doing it wrong and it's a problem. There's no good outcome for that. This is not like running a marathon where you should expect to throw up around mile 20. It doesn't have that kind of physical torture associated with it. So if it hurts, it's wrong. And I would even go farther and say, if it's hard, it's wrong. If you're struggling and you feel a lot of tension to get through passages, again, that's not really how it's supposed to be. It should feel natural, easy, and fluent. So if you're hurting at the piano, if it hurts, it's wrong. If it's hard, it's wrong. And you should probably think about getting some help.